In the previous video, we talked about how the science inquiry process begins with observations, and then the second step, very early on in the inquiry process, the scientist needs to come up with a testable question, a testable research question. They need to come up with some sort of question that they are going to design an experiment to test and try to find the answer to. So in this particular video, we're going to talk about developing a testable research question, because before you can do an experiment, you have to know what your question is. You have to know what it is you're trying to test. Okay, so the essential question for this set of notes is, what makes a research question testable? What makes a research question testable? All right, so when you are developing a testable research question, this is the process that you should follow. So the first thing you need to do is you need to identify an area of interest. So for me, as a teacher, I'm interested in how students learn, okay? Once you know what your area of interest is, then you're going to come up with a specific topic, right? So you need to get a little bit more specific. So I'm interested in how students learn. I want to specifically look at learning and food. I want to know how those things are related, okay? But even this is not specific enough. I need to refine it a little bit. So once you've picked your specific topic, then you're going to come up with your actual testable research question that you can design an experiment around. So for me, I'm going to refine this learning and food topic, and I am going to turn it into a testable question, and I am going to say, do students learn better before or after eating? So I'm going to look at the time that students eat, whether they eat before they learn or not, and then compare how well they learn. Okay? So let's look a little bit more at testable questions. Let's look at this chart real quick. So a testable question is a good question, right? We want our inquiry questions to be testable. If it's not testable, then it's not a good inquiry question, okay? So a testable question has two features. The first feature is the results can be measured in some way, right? So that means that there needs to be a dependent variable in the question. There needs to be something that you're going to measure, okay? Second, a testable question should only test one thing. So in other words, there should only be one independent variable in the question, okay? If there's no independent variable, if there's no thing being tested, then it's not a good inquiry question. So an example would be this down here, okay? Do students learn better before or after eating, okay? Learning better, right? How well they learn would be our dependent variable, because that's what we're going to measure. Maybe we'll look at how well they do on a test or something, right? Or the grade that they get in the class. And then we are testing whether or not they learn better before or after eating. So when they eat is the independent variable. That's the thing that we're changing and testing, okay? So this question has both an independent variable and a dependent variable, so this would be a good testable inquiry question. We could do an experiment to test this. Now let's look at non-testable questions, bad inquiry questions. A bad inquiry question, or a not testable one, opinion-based. If it's opinion-based, nope, we don't want opinion-based questions, okay? If it's a question that can be easily answered by looking in a book or on the internet, then we don't need to do an experiment to test that, right? It's already been researched, it's already there, and easy to look up. If the question tests more than one thing, right? So in other words, if there is no independent variable, there's no one thing that's being tested, then it's not a good inquiry question. If the question does not measure something specific, so if there's no dependent variable, if there's no specific thing that we're measuring, then it's not a good inquiry question. It's not testable. So an example of this right here would be, how do students learn best, right? So in this case, the thing that we are measuring is how well they learning best, right? So we do have a dependent variable, how well they learn. How do students learn best? But we don't have an independent variable, right? The question says, how do students learn best? it doesn't say, do students learn best before or after eating? Or do students learn best when they get more sleep? Or do students learn best when they get to sit on the floor instead of a chair, right? This question isn't specific enough. We have something that we're measuring. We have a dependent variable, how well they learn, but we don't have an independent variable. We don't have something that we're testing here. Okay. So, non-testable inquiry question examples. So let's look at some examples real quick. And what I want you to do is at the end of this slide, before I move on to the next slide, I want you to stop the video, and in your Cornell notes, in your INB, you're going to see these exact questions, and underneath each question, I want you to write what's in red. So you're going to need to type the red words into your inquiry INB. Okay? All right. So, which flower is prettier? Okay, this is not a good question. It's not testable because it's an opinion question, right? I might think that a rose is prettier, and my husband might think that a daisy is prettier, right? And there is no right or wrong answer to that. We just have different opinions. So we can't do an experiment to test that because it's an opinion question. Now, just to be clear, we could do a survey. So if you changed this question and you said, do more people prefer roses or daisies? That you could test because you could do a survey and compare the number of people who prefer roses versus daisies. But just asking which flower is prettier, that's going to depend on the person. So that's an opinion. What is the average temperature in February in Beaverton, Oregon? This is not a good testable question because it's a Google question. This is really easy to look up on the internet. You just get on Google, average February temperature for Beaverton, right? Someone has already done a study looking at this. This has already been posted on the internet. It's not a good experiment, right? And you don't really have to do an experiment to test this question, right? You just, in February, you just take the temperature every day and you calculate the average, right? You don't need to have multiple groups where you're purposely changing something between your groups. So this is not a question that would require a true experiment, okay? This is an observation you would make and then you and post and easily find on Google, okay? Why can't I fall asleep? Okay, why can't I fall asleep? This question is testing more than one thing, right? We do have a dependent variable, right? Falling asleep, right? When you fall asleep or how fast you fall asleep. But it just says why, right? We aren't testing one thing. Now, if we changed this, right, and we changed this question and we said, do I fall asleep faster when I don't drink soda before bed? That would be a good testable question because then you would have an independent variable, right? You would have soda versus no soda, and then you would see how fast you fall asleep. But in this example, why can't I fall asleep? We have a dependent variable, falling asleep, but we don't have something that we're testing. We don't have something that we're purposely changing for each of our two groups. Okay, so go ahead and write into your notes that this question is not testing one thing. There's no independent variable. This question, how does studying for a test affect me? Okay, this is not testable because there's nothing specific being measured. There's no dependent variable. So go ahead and type this red sentence there into your notes. Okay. How does studying for a test affect me? So in this case, we have an independent variable, right? We're going to have one group that studies for their test and one group that doesn't. But then affect you how? What are we going to be measuring? Are we measuring how well you do on the test? Are we going to measure how much sleep you got because you studied or didn't study? Are we going to be measuring the grade you got in the class at the end of the semester? This is not specific enough, right? We don't know what the dependent variable here is. We have an independent variable, but we don't know specifically what we're measuring at the end of the experiment. Okay? All right. These would be some examples of good inquiry questions. Which flower attracts the most bees? That would be a good inquiry question because our independent variable is which flower, right? You might have two different flowers, and then our dependent variable would be the number of bees. We're going to count how many bees go to each flower and compare. Okay, this question right here. Do I sleep less than 8 hours when I drink soda with dinner? Okay, this is a good inquiry question because we have an independent variable, right? Drinking soda. We might have one person drink soda and one person does not. And then we have a dependent variable, how much they sleep. And we're going to compare how many hours of sleep both people get, okay? So that would be a good testable question. How does the temperature affect the height of my fern plant? In this case, we have an independent variable, right? The temperature. We might have one plant in a cold room and one plant in a warm room. And then we're measuring the height of the plant to see if the temperature makes a difference. So the height would be the dependent variable. So this is a good testable question. Does eating cake affect my happiness? All right. This would be a testable question because you would have one person eat cake and one person not, right? Independent variable. And then afterwards you could measure their happiness by giving them a survey where they have to rate their happiness on a scale of 1 to 10 or something. So the dependent variable would be their happiness rating. All right. So this would be a testable question because you have an independent variable and a dependent variable. So what I want you to do now is I want you to go ahead and pause this video, and in your Cornell notes, in your inquiry unit INB, which you should have open in another tab, I want you to go ahead and find these questions. Okay, you'll see them right there in your notes, and I want you to highlight the IV in blue. So for each of these questions, I want you to highlight the independent variable in blue in your notes. And I want you to highlight the dependent variable in pink. Okay, so you're going to highlight the dependent variable in pink in each of these questions. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video and do that in your notes. Okay. Let's look at one more example, and this is going to be very much related to our bread mold lab, okay? So let's look at this question. Does cleaning your hands affect the amount of mold that develops on a piece of bread? Pause the video for a second and think about that. Do you think that question is testable? Is there an independent variable? Is there a dependent variable? Pause and think for a second. Okay. This question is testable, right? It is a good testable question because we have an independent variable, cleaning your hands, right? And we're going to have, one piece of bread that you washed your hands with soap and water, one piece of bread that you used hand sanitizer, one piece of bread that you didn't touch at all, and one piece of bread that you touched with dirty hands, right? So we do have something that we're purposely changing, right, that we're testing. And then we also have a dependent variable, something that we're measuring. And what we're going to measure at the end is the amount of mold that grows on each piece of bread, okay? So what I want you to do in your notes is go ahead and pause the video, and I want you to write in. You'll see exactly this in your notes, and there will be a section that says answer, and where it says answer, I want you to write testable, okay? Oops, there we go. This question is testable, so go ahead and type that in, and then I want you to type in these 4 reasons why this question is testable. This question is testable because it tests only one thing. There's an independent variable. It measures something specific, the amount of mold. It has a dependent variable. It's not an opinion-based question, right? And it's not a Google question. It's not something that you can easily observe and put on the internet. It requires an experiment to find the answer. Okay? So go ahead and type in these 4 things. These are the 4 reasons why this question is testable. Don't forget to upload a screenshot of the notes that you did in your INB so that I can see that you added all of these words in red. And then you are done with today's lesson. Thank you.